Welcome back, casual gardeners. Oh, look over there! A snail! Just kidding. It's December. I don't have any snails to show you, even if I did have a problem with snails and slugs in my garden, which I don't. It's not the time of year that I would see them. But that's when I'm making this video, so that hopefully when it's snail season again, you'll have this information to work with. You already know they are garden foes, but I'm slapping this video in the friends or foes playlist. If you have any other pests you're curious about, you can check and see if maybe I've made a video about them as well. Plus, I'm going to sprinkle in some random facts about snails because I'm a nerd and that's what nerds are into. Most snails and slugs are hermaphrodites, meaning they have both boy parts and girl parts. So if you get really mad at your slugs or snails and tell them to go friend themselves, they might take you up on the suggestion, so don't press your luck. Snails and slugs are gastropods, which means stomach foot, and that doesn't mean their stomach is in their foot. It just means that they crawl around on their belly, which is also a foot. Most gastropods are aquatic. Gastropods are the second most numerous animal class after insects, which means that there are a lot of them. And just like insects, even though we're mostly aware of the pests, most of them are not pests. So if you see a random snail or slug in your garden and you're not having a problem with snails and slugs in your garden, you can just leave it alone if you want to. It isn't necessarily doing harm. So here in North America, the most common garden snail is an invasive species that came out of Europe. It is the brown garden snail, Cornu aspersum, if I pronounce that right. Snails and slugs have habitat needs that overlap perfectly with a healthy garden, which is part of why they can be a problem for gardeners. They need moist, sheltered soil, frequent precipitation, like, when we water, and lots of decaying organic matter to eat, like what we need for our soil for our plants to grow and be healthy. If your garden doesn't have those things, your plants probably aren't doing very well. Now, in addition to those other factors, snails need some source of calcium to build their shells with. It is made primarily of calcium carbonate, which is the same thing as limestone or chalk. So here in Utah, where our soils can be anywhere from 15% to 40% calcium carbonate by mass, snails can be anywhere because we have the perfect growing conditions for snails, aside from the fact that we tend to be an arid climate. So that's really all that keeps our snails in check. If you live in an area with high precipitation, like what's happening right now here in Utah, you might have low calcium in your soil, and you are probably going to be more likely to have more slugs in your garden instead of snails, because the slugs don't have to build a shell. They aren't as dependent on ready access to calcium. But if you live near some sort of calcium deposit, like, I don't know, the White Cliffs of Dover or something, then you could still encounter a bunch of snails. Carrying fertilized eggs is hard work and takes a lot of energy. So even though most slugs and snails are hermaphrodites, there are some species that will have a sword fight and the loser has to do it. What do they use for swords? I'm going to have to ask you to use your imagination because I do not want my channel demonetized. There may be slugs and snails in our gardens, even if we don't see them. If there are no signs of damage, you have no reason to control them. They're just out there busily breaking down decaying organic matter and playing their part in the circle of life and minding their own business, and we can just let them do that. But sometimes we do see signs of their presence, and sometimes those signs are dead or dying plants. Tender seedlings or developing fruits and vegetables in contact with the ground are where we're more likely to see damage from slugs and snails. In my old garden, I saw a lot of it on my strawberries because those are berries on the ground and they're soft and delicious, and slugs and snails love them. Their favorite crops are strawberries, basil, tomatoes, lettuce, and a bunch of other stuff, beans, but they will feed on other crops as well. These are predators of convenience in the garden. They're also very fond of hostas and daylilies and marigolds and a lot of other flowers. Snails can have up to 250,000, I don't even know how many that is, teeth in an organ called a radula. It works a little bit like a tiny chainsaw. They use the radula to scrape things into their mouths. They don't chew their food. Look for irregular holes with smooth edges around the leaf margins, or sometimes even in the center of the leaf. That is a sign of snail damage, but it's not diagnostic because there are a lot of plant predators that leave holes like that in the leaves. So in addition to finding holes in your leaves, to really know it is snails or slugs, you're also going to want to find maybe some slime trails, or maybe their characteristic slimy brownish green turds all over the place. If you see those, you got slugs or snails. Snails and slugs have tentacles. Did you know they have tentacles? They have tentacles. They have 4 of them. 2 of them have little photoreceptors on the ends of them and look like eyes. All 4 of their tentacles can smell. And when I say smell, I mean kind of like how we taste. So if you touch a snail on the eye, it smells your finger. Snails were a massive problem in my old garden. I don't have any snail damage signs in my new garden, thank goodness. My lettuce is safe. But in my old garden, it seemed like I couldn't put out a seedling or start things from seed without losing most of what I had planted. It was a big issue for me. So we had a big patch of ivy growing in one of the side yards. When we tore out all that ivy, my snail problem disappeared. The snails were seeking shelter under that dense growth of ivy during the heat of the day and then coming out at night to ravage my garden. And once the ivy was gone, the snail population went down as well, and I was able to start enjoying my garden until we sold the house and I had to build a new garden. But luckily, not a lot of snails here, so it's fine. It's fine. So cultural control is the most effective means of controlling snails and slugs. And by cultural control, I mean the way we garden. So we're not doing anything specifically against slugs and snails. We're just gardening in a way that doesn't play in their favor. Water using drip irrigation instead of overhead watering. That means most of the water is going to end up under the soil where it doesn't benefit the snails and slugs, instead of on the soil surface where they can take advantage. Water in the morning instead of at night. If we water in the morning, that's a lot less time when there are moist conditions that are perfect for snails and slugs for them to go out and wreak their damage out in our gardens. Instead, the water is going to seep into the ground or evaporate before it does them any good. Increase the interval between watering as often as you can. In my next video, I'm going to talk about watering, and we're going to talk about why spreading your waterings out as much as you can is just generally a good thing, even without slugs and snails. It also helps versus slugs and snails. Remove any scrap lumber or rocks or things that slugs and snails could hide under in or around your garden. Whenever possible, prune your fruits and vegetables so that their leaves are up away from the ground, or trellis them or stake them or whatever. Get as much of their foliage up off the ground so the ground is clear of protective structures for snails and slugs to hide under. You can discourage slugs by removing damaged or dying foliage from your plants and making sure that your soil around your plants is clear of debris that can feed or shelter the slugs. And then, as we talked about with the ivy problem, locate your garden away from tall turf or dense growth like ivy or another dense ground cover, because those are places that provide shelter and amazing habitat for snails and slugs. If you're farther away, the snails and slugs are less likely to go to your garden. They're going to find food somewhere else. Snails and slugs are deaf. They don't have any organs for hearing. So if you do yell at a slug or a snail to go friend itself and it does it, that was probably its own idea in the first place. Hand picking is gross and tedious and takes a lot of time, but it's also effective. If you're hand picking snails or slugs, do not crush them in your garden. A crushed snail or slugs could contain fertile eggs, and by just crushing it and leaving it there, you're providing opportunities for those eggs to hatch. Snails can produce about 50 eggs in a clutch. Some people eat snail eggs and call them white caviar. Have you ever tried white caviar? Let me know down in the comments, or not if you're ashamed. Can't blame you either way. If you're hand picking, water in the evening to encourage the slugs and snails to actually come out, because you want to encourage them so you can find them and wage your war against them. Drop all the slimy mollusks that you gather into a bag or a container of soapy water. That way you can take them to the garbage when you're done, not leave them in the garden where any eggs they're carrying could hatch. Land snails can breathe with lungs. There's a little hole that lets the air in right down by where the shell is. You can also see little holes on slugs because they are the same. In more humid environments, land snails and slugs may also have gills. Barriers can also be a good control method for slugs and snails, but they're only effective if there is another food source besides your garden for them to go to instead. Starving snails and slugs will brave any barrier to get into your garden. Also, eggshells aren't effective. Yeah, they're pokey, but slug and snail slime is really difficult to penetrate. That's what the slime is for, is to protect their tender bellies from crawling over the rough ground. It will also protect them from eggshells. It will protect them from hair. Those are not effective barriers. One effective barrier against slugs and snails is copper. You can use a copper mesh or copper plate. It needs to be at least 8 inches wide. If anything bridges that copper barrier, it's not going to be effective though, and you're going to end up with snails in your garden anyway. Snails can seal off their shells when environmental conditions are not great for them and kind of hibernate until things get better. Except it's not really hibernation because it's called estivation. Snails can estivate for months at a time until the environment changes until it's favorable for snails again. Well, there goes my fan turning on with the good light, so sorry for the change in sound quality. You can use traps to control snails and slugs in your garden. Board traps will provide a controlled shelter that the slugs and snails will hide under. So just take a board and nail or staple a couple of small risers to the edges so it sticks up off the ground a little bit. Your slugs and snails will crawl underneath that during the day, and you can go out during the day and flip it over and handpick them and dispose of them. You can also use beer traps. The alcohol in the beer is not what's attractive. They are attracted to the yeast. So if you don't want to buy beer and you have yeast, you can mix up a solution of yeast, and that yeast smell will attract the snails without the alcohol. It is the water, not the alcohol, that kills the snails in a beer trap. So they just climb in and drown. So it's effective without beer. Beer is just a relatively cheap and easy way to set the trap. Snails first appear in the fossil record 550 million years ago in the Cambrian. That means that snails are more ancient than the land plants that they sometimes eat. You can also construct other bait stations. So bait is just something that is attractive and not very nice for the snails and slugs to eat. I like bait stations in combination with chemical control because they reduce the possibility of exposing any pets in your garden to the bait. All of the snail and slug bait is potentially harmful to pets, even the ones that say that they are safe for pets. So if you keep them in a bait station, that is going to reduce the exposure. So that could be as simple as a yogurt tub that you've cut windows in halfway up, and you put the bait in and you slap the lid on, then you bury it up to the level of the windows so it's easy for the slugs and snails to get in. An advantage of the bait stations, aside from protecting your animals in your garden from the bait, is that it will protect the bait from exposure to water. Some baits are going to be deactivated by exposure to water, and this will just help your bait budget a little bit. So the metaldehyde baits are going to be more dangerous for your pets than the iron phosphate baits. Metaldehyde is also going to be more likely to be deactivated by water. If you are going to be exposing your baits to water, you're better off using an iron phosphate bait. If you can find an iron phosphate bait that does not contain EDTA, it will in fact be pet safe. But most iron phosphate baits do contain EDTA, and it's the EDTA that is potentially hazardous for your pets. Now, EDTA is not toxic, actually. It's not a poison. What it does is it scavenges metals from around it and locks them up so that our bodies can't get into them. So if you got heavy metal poisoning, you might be given a solution of EDTA by your doctor to kind of pull those heavy metals out of your system so you can flush them out instead of getting, heavy metal poisoning from them. You also use EDTA in solution medicinally in dogs and cats in some situations, but uncontrolled use of EDTA can result in poison-like symptoms. So it's just generally a good idea to make sure we're not exposing our animals to EDTA without, doing it in a way that a veterinarian would agree with. And of course, if your pet ingests any bait, if you see any signs that your pet is unwell at all, please take him to a vet. Snails can communicate with each other using special chemicals in their slime. It's kind of like when dogs sniff fire hydrants, but the world is their fire hydrant. Snails and slugs are right up there as one of the most common pests that gardeners are going to be complaining about and struggling to deal with. What are your favorite ways to deal with snails and slugs? Let me know down in the comments. We can accidentally help quiet people who aren't commenting out with our comments, and that sounds like a win-win to me. Like this video if you found it helpful, and please subscribe to this channel. It'll help me out. It will get me things like pricier ads and sponsors and stuff so that I can quit my crappy day job and do this full time. You can even become a channel member, which will allow me to quit my crappy day job that much sooner and just really start cranking out the videos. Thank you so much for joining me here in my garden today. I hope you have a wonderful time in your own garden.